Once you have all of your material ready, it's time to begin editing. Hey everyone, it's Steven here for another session of our Sundance Collab course presented by Xiaomi. Now, you probably have your production wrapped, you have tons of footage of dramatic moments and tense action. So what's next? Post. Although a lot of the process might be familiar to you, it's still useful to go through it within the context of a smartphone workflow. So let's jump into it. First things first, let's start with getting footage off your phone. It works differently for different systems, but basically it comes down to two ways, either a wired transfer or a cloud service. Most smartphones have some sort of cloud service which can be extremely useful when backing up footage. It's like having your very own DIT on set. Just make sure you have enough cloud space and the internet to do so, especially if you are shooting bigger files. Now that you have all of your footage backed up, it's time to check your footage. Although this is a big part of any post-production workflow, there are some things to look out for when shooting on a phone. Make sure to look out for some mobile filmmaking quirks that can pop up. What do you mean by this? Well, let's just say that smartphones sometimes can come across some issues during shooting. Autofocus hunting, electronic stabilization issues, color shifting, etc. So it's very important to look out for these quirks, especially when you're shooting, so they don't end up in your final product. Of course, unless you want them to. And now, it's all about organizing your footage before you begin editing. Once you've done all of that, we can move on to the fun part, at least for some people, editing. First, we want to start with smartphones themselves. With all of the amazing and powerful apps available today, you can actually edit the entire film on a smartphone. You can either use the pre-installed apps or a third-party app to create your own movie magic. This can be wonderful if you are on the go or if you don't have access to a computer. It can also be great for content creators who need to get high-quality content out quickly. One common use of smartphone apps for editing is editing rushes on the go for clients or other parties. But as this is a filmmaking course and the majority of you will most likely be editing the traditional way, it's not likely that you will be editing your entire film on a phone. But third-party apps can still be very useful for creating a rush or assembling on the run or even during shooting. Editing on a PC is much more conventional and it definitely gives you more flexibility. Once you have all of your material into your editing software of choice, it's time to begin editing. The main thing to remember is that with smartphone footage, it's much lighter to work with, so you don't have to work with proxies or change the format. But at the same time, since the file sizes are a lot smaller, you have a lot less space to work with in terms of the footage data. So I normally try to not push the footage too far in terms of color grading or serious effects, but you'll still be amazed by what you can do and what you can get out of the footage. After you feel comfortable with your edit, it's time to put on the finishing touches. This includes anything from graphics to titles and even music. Approach this part as you would your usual post-production process. And that's it. You should be getting close to having your finished product. Let's check in with Sal and Bart in Poland. Sal and Bart are a pair of filmmakers who joined Xiaomi Studios earlier this year as our first Polish Xiaomi creators and our first couple of creators. They will walk us through the post-production process for their latest film, The Night Shift. Sal and Bart shot this film in the world-famous Sukiennice Museum in Krakow, Poland, telling the story of a museum that literally comes to life at night. The film was absolutely amazing and even won an award at an international film festival. They will walk us through the post-production process on this film. Let's go talk to them. Hey Sal and Bart, it's great to see you guys again. I just wanted to congratulate you on the amazing film you guys made. It was really awesome. My first question for you was, how was the post-production process for this film?
Yeah, so editing a short film like The Night Shift is always a real pleasure because with the initial planning and pre-production of the video, the hardest part has already been done. So it's like having all the bricks and now you just need to build it up into the perfect house.
Yeah, that's one of the first steps. You filter through the footage, you choose your very best shots, you pick out the key shots that are fundamental to the story, and then you assemble them in approximately the right order on a timeline.
Yeah, and then next is the editing magic, such as the reverse freeze of the statue's eye, any speed ramps, special effects like the dust particles, or the snow overlay at the beginning over the time lapse. This part's really important because it gives such a professional touch to the mobile short film that it adds a lot of production value.
We usually start building this up quite early on in the process to make sure that we can see how the sort of excitement is building through the story. And then next follows the color correction and grading once all of the previous section is in place.
Yeah, this is always a really fun one to make sure you hone in on the style of the video that you're really going for. For example, with this film, we wanted a very matte and like vintage style to kind of match the, style of the museum.
Yeah, I think it's important to not think of colour grading as a purely aesthetic thing, but it's also an aspect that adds to the storytelling. So it's far more powerful than I think people think. That's why we don't leave it till the very end.
And this is what also can set apart a really good film from a not so good film, as it can give the film a whole like cohesive and really professional filmic look.
And once that's dialed in, we go into another crucial aspect, which is the audio. The audio engineering, adding any sound effects, especially focusing on the ones that are key to enhancing the storyline, such as in the night shift, the closing of the door, the footsteps of the guard, or the sound of the wind howling in the empty square at night.
Yeah, any audio that you hear in the night shift film is created in post-production. It's a very long process which requires a lot of different layers to really make the viewer feel like they're there and immersed in the film. And yeah, a really fun part to make.
Yeah, and once that's in place, finally we move on to the music production. This was actually composed at the very end, especially for our film. This was a really special process for us because we consulted directly with the composer throughout the process of post-production. So it was being developed kind of scene by scene alongside our film.
Yeah, so for example, the final dance, we edited that to like the correct tempo, and then we sent this to the composer so he had something to work with whilst we worked on the rest of the film.
So my next question is, what difficulties did you guys come across when you were making this film?
Yeah, as we said, the music was composed during post-production, so this was an added difficulty in many ways. It was a completely new thing to edit without having the music from the start, and this made it quite difficult. Usually we create all of our edits to a song, and in this case we had to work out the timings and the cuts and the assembly just purely on the flow of the story, which was a pretty unique challenge.
Yeah, it was. You have to really have an understanding of the tempo of the film and know that that's how you want it to look, because yeah, like we said, we're usually doing it to the pace of a song, whereas this is purely on feeling. So that was a really special thing to work on this time. And that's what made it so great to hear so many compliments about the story and the music.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you guys, how does mobile post-production differ from traditional post-production? And is there anything that you would give, any recommendations or any suggestions that you would give for new filmmakers or people that are doing mobile post-production for the first time?
Yeah, they're actually very surprisingly similar processes. Like I really have to think there about what's different in our workflow. But that is what's so amazing about mobile filmmaking today. It's just a scaled down version of working with a DSLR or a mirrorless or a cinema camera even. I would say that there is less work from a colour perspective, like the grading and correction has to be much more gentle, for example, and you have to be more accurate when filming in terms of composition and exposure, because you can't make those corrections as much to really get the most out of the phone and maximise the quality.
Yeah, when it comes to cinema cameras or even, the top mirrorless cameras nowadays, they offer you these crazy resolutions, 4K, 6K, 8K.
So many Ks.
So many Ks. Loads of cameras now offer 10-bit 422 colours, which all of that gives you so much more flexibility and the ability to crop in, reframe,
The ability to fix it in post.
Yeah, to fix it in post. So this is a major difference. With a phone, you just have to be that bit more accurate, that bit more careful, and any tweaking has to be subtle to maximise that resolution, that quality, and keep it crisp.
Yeah, and really maximise the quality and maximise what you get out of the phone.
So that's it for another session of Sundance Collab course presented by Xiaomi. Join us in the next session, the final session, where we see a film come together and what you could do with it once it's done. Thanks again and see you guys soon.